Today I just want to show you how to work your first row of granny stitches over your setup row. This is a technique that I use a lot in my recent patterns, as I think that it gives the first row of stitches a really good base to hang from, because this row is quite chunky, and working over the top of the setup row and into the base of it means that those granny stitches in the first row don't have such big gaps between them as they would if you were just working into a regular foundation chain. So I'm going to show you how I do that today. I'll show you first working back and forth, and then I'll show you in the round. So this is a UK foundation double crochet row. That's US foundation single crochet. I do have a separate tutorial for this if you want to learn how to make these stitches. So assuming you've made the right amount of stitches, we're now going to work granny stitches, which will be row 1 over the top of our setup row. So because granny stitches are made up of UK trebles, US doubles, we're going to chain 3 to count as our first treble. So that chain 3 is coming out of that first stitch, which is this one here. So the chain 3 is part of the first stitch, miss the second stitch, and we're going to 3 treble into the third stitch. So yarn over and go into the middle of that stitch. So you can see that you've got 3 bars on the top and 2 bars on the bottom of your hook. So the chunkier part of the setup row is on the top of your hook. So you're crocheting over the chunkier part of the row. I think I actually used to do it the other way around when I first started, but then I realised that we want the chunkiest part to take up some of that space between the granny stitches. So that's what it should look like. You've got a V on the bottom and your granny stitch group in there. So we're now going to miss 2 stitches, so miss that one, and we're going to work into that space there with 1 V on the bottom for our next granny stitch group. So work your 3 UK trebles, US doubles into that space, and that's what you should have. Now you're going to miss 2 spaces or 2 stitches and work into the next one. And you'll continue that all the way along your row, and you can see that that helps to fill up some of the space between the stitches, and then row 2 will fill up some of that space at the top, so your first row won't look too holey. So to do it in the round, you're just going to join up the ends of your setup row with a slip stitch, and then you're going to chain 3 to count as your first stitch. So chain 3 counts as your first UK treble, US double for your first granny stitch group, and you're then going to work your granny stitches or your trebles into the base of that stitch where that 3 chain is coming out of. So if you look, you can see that you've got these V's that are facing you. We're going to work into the space between the 2 legs of that V that's facing you at the bottom. So for this first one, it's into there. I'm going to go in there with our 2 treble. So I'm just going to go ahead and work those 2 treble in there to complete my first granny stitch group. And just tighten your tail a minute just to keep that nice and neat, and that's your first granny stitch group worked. So now you're going to miss 2 stitches, so miss that stitch and work into that stitch, and you're going to go into the space between those V's that are facing you. So if I just go in there, you'll see that the majority of the setup row is on top of your hook, and under your hook you've still got 2 V's. So it is slightly different to working backwards and back and forth. Because the row is at a slightly different angle, you have to go into it at a different place. You're going in between those V's that are facing you on the bottom. So miss another 2 stitches and go into there. So miss that one and go into there. You can see that the majority of that setup row is helping to fill up the gaps between your first row of granny stitch, and you can do this with regular stitches as well, not just granny stitch. So that's what it will look like, and if I just bring it closer, you can see that you've still got a V on the bottom there, so you've still got 2 bars underneath from which to work your rib, if this is a neckline or if this is a cuff. So you've still got plenty of sort of stitch to work your rib onto, which will be nice and secure. And then your last stitch will go in there, your last granny stitch group, sorry, and then you'll miss 2 stitches and you'll slip stitch to the top of your 3 chain there. And I said in my previous video about making the foundation double crochet row that you can thread this up onto a yarn needle and just thread it through here and just tighten that gap there. So just pull that gap together, because you do get a bit of a gap here. So you can weave that tail in along there to close up that gap. And that's what your first row will look like.